isn't to convince you that remakes are bad, this is just one pretentious twat's opinions. The Oblivion remake is partly responsible for this video. When I saw that it was coming out, I thought, don't care, I've got the original, and moved on. But now, all I'm seeing whenever I see people talking about games I like is whether or not they should be remastered, and by the votes of 4 people, I'm going to talk about why I don't like remasters as a concept. To lay out some definitions, because I know there's a difference between remasters, remakes and reboots. Remasters are visual and audio updates, while remakes also affect the gameplay, and reboots just have a new game with the same title. I'm going to try and use the correct terms in this video, but I'm probably going to mess up at least once. Onto the video. To be fair, I'll start off with a few things that I like about remasters and remakes. I like how they put the game back into the public consciousness, which introduces more people to the game or series. Updated game credits, like with the Mass Effect Legendary Edition, where they updated the credits and changed the name of a developer who transitioned after the game's release. And finally, minor bug fixes, like crashes or memory problems. For example, if the Elder Scrolls Arena was remastered, the run out of memory error would be fixed. Enough positivity, onto bitching. Whenever a game is remastered, it gets a new coat of paint to make the graphics better fit with the standards of the time. And that's where the problem lies. Eventually, and sometimes even within a few years, graphics will look outdated again, or gameplay mechanics will feel archaic. So what are you going to do now? Make a remake? This is best seen in my mind with the Resident Evil series. Capcom have been remaking their games in the series to be closer to Resident Evil 4 style of gameplay, but this series of remakes started with Resident Evil 2, because Resident Evil 1 was remastered back in 2002, which now makes the original remaster out of place compared to the remakes. And I guess they don't want to make a new remaster and confuse people because the remastered version is just called Resident Evil. So then there'd be Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 1 for the GameCube, and then the Resident Evil 1 remake. An example of a remaster aging poorly is the Halo CE remaster. I found the art direction change for the remaster's graphics made them look too over-detailed and harder to read what was happening around you because everything would just blend together. And it doesn't hold up that well. In my opinion, this was fixed for the Halo 2 remaster by the art closer matching the direction to the original and keeping the style more streamlined. On the other end of this, a game's remaster tends to increase the system requirements for a game, which reduces the amount of people who can play the game, and for the longest time, I was one of those people. Here's 2 examples, Metroid 2033 and Skyrim. For the longest time, the laptop I had would not have been able to run the Redux or Special Edition versions of the games, but it would have been able to run the originals, which were taken off the stores for the remasters. And I know you can't always focus on the lowest specs possible because the average person will always be getting a better computer or console due to the components getting cheaper, but keeping both versions up or making it so that you get both with purchase would remove this problem entirely. And this is a little side tangent, but I also have an annoyance towards the need for higher graphical fidelity, because not only does it make games longer to make and cost more, but the higher resolutions tend to make some games look worse. Here's an example. Here's Far Cry 3 running on my Xbox 360 into a 1080p flat screen. Looks pretty standard, graphics have aged a bit but I still think they look good. And here's Far Cry 3 running on a CRT, how I first experienced it. The fuzz of the CRT improves the graphics a bit by hiding its imperfections. And I'm not saying bring graphic quality back to 480p or 480i, I just think the 2K and 4K fidelity is a bit excessive for what the average person would have, and the file sizes that come with it. On to the next point. Whenever a game is remade, it's to better suit more modern games in the series, and I find that all it does is remove the game's original identity and make it feel the same as everything else. For example, the older Resident Evil games were completely changed from a top-down survival horror to a over-the-shoulder third-person shooter survival horror to better match what Resident Evil 4 became. I don't know why I'm banging on about Resident Evil so much. I'm not even that much of a fan of the series. On the other side of this is the re-releases of GTA 3, where since the mobile version of the game, a map was added. This change was done to fit with the rest of the 3D era of the GTA games, and because the PS2 version came with a map and future releases didn't, so it sort of makes up for it, but it does reduce the need to learn the map as much as it did on the PS2 version. Another bit of homogenization is every AAA developer wanting to switch to the Fortnite engine. I'll call it the Unreal Engine when I can buy Unreal again. Until then, Fortnite engine. You see this with the definitive edition of GTA, the Oblivion remake, and the rumoured Halo 1 re-remake. I know that we're not in a tech race to see who can make the most powerful engine anymore, but I liked how the 360 era of games all felt different depending on who made them. Games like GTA 4, Saints Row 2 and Driver San Francisco's Driving all felt very different despite coming out around the same time, and I find the trend towards the Fortnite engine is making games feel and look similar. This is the most important point for me. Whenever a game is remade, I see it as changing how people will experience gaming's history. Because even if the original is still available, most people will default to getting the new and improved version of the game. And I don't see that as the original game. It's how the company, or whoever owns the IP now, would make the game. And that just removes the game's impact on the industry and how it's now homogenized with everything else, and you can no longer see how graphics have evolved, gameplay design, and culture, for better or worse. For example, password saving is bad and no longer serves a purpose in the gaming industry past the 2000s. But games with it should be preserved so people can see what it was like and why it was abandoned as quickly as possible. An example of other people redesigning a game is Black Mesa. While not being made by Valve, people treat it like an official remake. Now, I don't hate the devs for making it. I like the idea of fans making changes with mods to games they enjoy. Hell, I've gotten used to the combat mods I use in Skyrim and Fallout 4. My problem is people saying, don't play the original, just play Black Mesa. As close as Black Mesa followed the original, it's still not Half-Life because it doesn't have the history of the game or its design that gave the original its impact on the industry. I've always likened remakes and remasters like these to the old console ports of games like Doom on the PS1 and Xbox, and the DS ports of the old LEGO games. These games aren't quite the popular games that they're based on, but they're what different development teams or software limitations would have affected the game in its development. Another thing is the apparent want for a remake to change a game's genre to fit with the newer games. Take the Fallout franchise. The first 4 games were all isometric and mostly turn-based. Having them remade into 3D FPSs fundamentally changed the games, and might as well be new games with how little they would resemble the original. And for remakes and reboots like these, there was a time in the early 2010s where old games were rebooted to fit with contemporary games. Like Syndicate, which was a top-down RTS franchise turned into an FPS, or Thief, which had all of its openness removed to be closer to Dishonored and to work with new game engines. The only game which survived this was XCOM, because it kept to the same genre, but just made the games more accessible to a newer audience. With all of my grievances out of the way, how would I deal with remasters, because nostalgia drunk suckers will always buy them? Firstly, never remove access to the original version of the game. That should just be a given. Secondly, if a remaster is made, give it to people who own the original, because it's stupid to pay $90 for a texture pack basically. Bethesda used to do this. They gave anyone who owned the original version of Skyrim the special edition for free. And for remakes, at a minimum, they should be given at a discount to the owners. Age of Empires 2 did this for a bit, but a permanent discount would be better. And thirdly, if the original will no longer run, like it ran on DOS or something like that, there should be an inbuilt way to return the game to its original state. So basically what Night Dive does most of the time. Usually when they remaster a game, there's an option to play the original version if it's a PC game. Not really if it's a console port, because that's emulation. They did make some AI changes for when they did their Quake remasters, but there was still a DOS version that you could play through a source port or DOSBox. But ideally, games wouldn't be remastered or remade for the reasons I mentioned, and they'd be kept in a working state. Check out Stop Killing Games. I hope I clearly explained why I dislike remasters and remakes and why I prefer games to be as they were originally designed. I might cover the first game I hated next because that was the only other option that got voted for. Till then, tally-ho.